Release the Kraken!
Good evening, fellow game designers. Ron here with Lame Duck Studios, and we are back in our ship project. So here's my little spaceship, and I do have the fire we created in the previous tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to create a weapon mechanism, so a laser that we can shoot. So let's go ahead and get on with that. So over here in our content, let's add a material. So I'm going to come in here, materials, right click, material. I'm going to call this laser material. And this is going to be kind of similar to what we did for the particle. So let's go ahead and select our shader here. Change our blending mode from opaque to translucent. And our shading model, let's change that to unlit. Alright, so just like we had in the other particle system, so we need our particle color. So particle color, we have that. And we're going to multiply this through a gradient. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a couple multiplies here. That's M and then click. So if I hold down the M key and then click, I can create these. But we only need 2 of them. So there we go. I'll plug 1 into emissive and 1 into opacity, because we know where they're going to be going. Now our shader over here disappeared, but it's okay. We'll get that back. Now, unlike in the previous tutorial where we created a spherical particle, we're going to create a beam that's in a straight line. So we want a linear gradient. So we're going to look for linear and then gradient. So linear gradient, there it is. Grab that. And on here we have our U and our V. So the U corresponds to the x-axis, or the horizontal axis, and the V stands for corresponds to the vertical axis. And then off of that, let's see, we're going to multiply. Let me grab my horizontal gradient here. And multiply. And I'm going to multiply this by some number. So I'm going to just come out here. I'm going to hold down the 1 key and then click. That's going to bring in a constant. All a constant is a variable. It just holds a number. So I'm going to plug that in. And I'm going to do 0.5. I'm going to pass this into a sine. So sine, just a regular sine. Open that up. So that's going to create this. And then I'm going to pass that into a power. So power. If I open that up, you can see what we're creating. Now this is actually creating my beam in the wrong direction. So instead of doing my U, I'm going to do my V. So let's swap that out. Give it a second to update. And you can see this is the beam being generated. And I'm going to pass this into the B channel for both of those. It doesn't matter which channel because we're multiplying. My RGB color is going to go into the A for my emissive color. And then my alpha channel for my opacity will go into the A for my opacity. So now we have a straight beam. And if your sign hasn't updated, don't worry. You can just do this and it'll refresh. Hit the checkbox to apply it. Save it. And now let's go ahead and add our new particle system. So effects, right click, we're going to do a particle system. We'll call this laser. I'm going to open that up. Go ahead and select the required tab. Come down to our material, add in our material, so laser material. Now, this isn't exactly what we want. Let's go ahead and create a special type of data. So I'm going to right click on here and come down to particle system, or sorry, type data, and then go down to beam data. And that's going to give us a more beam-like particle. Look at that. Up to the top here where it says origin axis, let's toggle that on so we can see where our beam is starting. And you can see our beam is popping in at various angles and changing stuff. And we don't really want it to do that. We want it to be a consistent straight line. So first things first, let's get rid of how many are popping in. So under spawn, let's go to rate. And we only want one beam. So in here under constant, it's going to be 1. So that fixes that. And then under lifetime, I'm going to open lifetime up. I don't ever want my beam to actually die, so I'm going to change my lifetime to 0. When you change this to 0, you're actually making it infinite. So I'm going to go ahead and just change those both to 0, and you'll see it'll stop popping out. So now it's just a continuous beam. Initial size I'll keep. We don't want our beam actually moving, so we don't even need the velocity. I'm going to go ahead and delete that module. So right click on velocity, go ahead and delete that. It's going to disappear. Don't worry, we'll get it back. And then for color over life, I don't need that either. I'm going to go ahead and delete color over life. Let's add back in a new color. We'll do initial color. Let's go up to beam data. Let's get our beam back. So under beam, we're going to change this from target to distance. That's going to give us a new beam being generated over a distance. Look at that. Come all the way down. The speed determines how quickly our beam will fill. So if I change this to 0, it'll always be filled. If I change it to 100, it'll fill up like that. If I change it to 5, it'll fill up like that. This will become more important later. I'm going to leave it as it is. Let's come on down to our distance. So distance, open that up. And I want my beam to be about 100 units. So 100. That'll give me a much longer beam. Let's kind of scroll back up. If I change that to 0, you'll see what I mean. So there is a beam, but it's way too thick. So let's go over to initial size. Open that up. And you can see that our size is a distribution vector uniform, but you'll see as you change this. So if I change any of these values, you can see how nothing matters except for the x value. So if I type in something on the x value, suddenly I get a change. So since it doesn't really matter except for the x value, I don't really need all this extra data. I'm going to come up here to distribution. I'm going to come down to distribution vector constant. That'll just break this down to 3 variables, and I'm going to have just my x, however big I want the beam to be. So I'll do like a 3, and that'll give me a beam about that size. Now you can see that our beam is starting from the middle and then traveling out, but that's not exactly what I want. I actually want our beam, because when we create our weapon to fire, we want the end of the beam, or the front of the beam, to be the thing that hits the target. If the beam is way out here, it's going to pass through the target up until it hits the collision body. And it's kind of a pain, so let's not do that. We're going to have this moved back and have the front of the beam be the thing that hits. Let's go back up to beam data. I'm going to go down to my distance. Where are you at? Distance. And I'm going to change my distance from a positive 100 to a negative 100, so minus 100. So now our beam is being drawn from this direction. Okay, let's go up to our fill, and you'll kind of see what happens. So if we go to our speed here, and I change this to 100, this is how our beam sort of fills out. And that's kind of what we want, because we want it, when it starts, it's going to start off small and then kind of get bigger. But let's leave this at 0 for now, and you'll see what I mean. Also, let's change the color. So initial color, we'll start off at our start color. And let's change this to whatever you want it to be. Let's have like I'll do like a green laser beam. You can make whatever color you want, but that's cool. I'll save that, save all. So now we have something we can use to shoot at our enemy, whatever enemy we have. So blueprints, let's go into player, and really should create a new thing for this, but it's alright. I'm just going to go ahead and do a blueprint class. We'll make this an actor. I'll call this laser. go ahead and open this up. And what I need in here is a collision boundary. So I'm going to do a sphere collision. So sphere collision. Good enough. We'll make this the root. And I'll name this sphere collision. We'll also add our particle system. So add particle system. Call this laser. I'll load my laser in. And you'll see our laser starts from the center and works its way back, right? So this is the size of our beam. And then to change the size of our sphere, go ahead and select it. And then we have sphere radius. I'm going to dial that down to something about the size of the end of my laser. And it's probably better that this is smaller than the beam. So I'm going to go in about like that. Because a player will get mad if they get hit and it's like out here. So if this hits, you'd be like, no way, that never hit me, right? But you'd be okay if it just grazes you, and that wouldn't make you mad, right? So kind of get it close enough. I think I'm going to do a value of 2 for my radius. Okay, and now we need a particle movement, projectile movement. So add a component and do projectile movement. And our projectile movement is going to be very simple. We're going to come over to the side here. We have our initial speed and our max speed. And if you hover over, it says initial speed of projectile is, if it's greater than 0, will override the velocity value. So if we scroll down, you can see we do have a velocity value. You can set this to whatever you want it to be, but you don't have to. If you use this value up here, then it'll ignore the velocity value and just kind of treat that as a direction, which is fine. So whatever we set here, just try not to get confused with these. It is kind of easy to see velocity and then another speed and go, well, which one do I use? You can use either, but just be aware that if you're using this one, you want these to be 0. If you're going to use these, then whatever is in here will get ignored. Just be aware of that. So for our initial speed, I'm just going to do 1,000. And then I'm going to cap it at 1,000, assuming our laser could ever go any faster. It's just going to stop at 1,000. For the projectile gravity, if you don't want your projectile to ever fall to the ground, set this to 0, which is what I'm going to do. Now compile it. And now let's get this thing spawning. So go to our object here, or our player. Come in here, find a good spot. Oh, that's probably good enough. I'm going to create a new bubble. Just press the C key, and I'll call this fire laser. And in here, we're going to fire our laser. So we need a button first. So what button should we use? Well, I'm going to use my mouse button. So I'm going to come up to Edit, Project Settings. Let's go down to Input. Under Action Map, I'm going to create a new action. We don't need the axis because it doesn't matter for the direction. It's going to face wherever we're facing. So this is going to be fire. You can call it fire laser. You can call it shoot. Whatever you want to do. I'm going to say fire weapon. I'm going to say fire laser. Laser. Open that up. We're going to do mouse, and I'm going to do the left mouse button. Cool. So I'm going to right click, fire laser. So there's my action event. Off of here, I'm going to spawn actor from class. This one. Spawn actor from class. When this comes in, we need to tell it what actor we want to spawn. So go into the class here. I'm going to type in laser. So there's my laser actor. We need the transform of our player. So let's go ahead and grab that. So get actor transform. There's that. And if I hit compile, let's go do a quick save here. And if I hop into my ship, I can shoot my laser. Let me go turn my camera back on so you can see where things are going. So inside of here, I believe I have camera controls somewhere. I do not. I never set them up. Okay, so just for this, let's set up a camera. So I'll say camera controls. I don't really need them on my particular ship, but it'll make it easier to see the laser. Let's add in 2 more buttons. Let's come down here, input, axis map. I'll add in 2 buttons. I'll do this one as camera up. Up, and then this one's going to be camera turn. Let's see. Mouse for up and down, that'll be the Y value. And I like an inverted mouse, so I'm going to do a -1. But this could be whatever you like. And this one's going to be the X axis for the mouse. Right click, let's do camera up and camera turn. For the up, we need the pitch, so pitch, add controller pitch. And then to turn left and right, we want our yaw, so add controller yaw. On the spring arm, we want to make sure that we have our use pawn control rotations. So we did turn these off earlier, but I'm going to turn them back on just so that we can use our camera. So let's go ahead and minimize, I'll hit play. Now I can move my camera and I can kind of see where my laser is going. And you can see as I fire my laser, it does of course shoot, which is great. I can shoot from whatever angle I am. So if I fly, I can kind of shoot. It follows my ship. But I have a couple problems. The first one is you can see as it spawns in, it kind of spawns and kind of pierces through my ship, which I don't want. So that's why we're going to set a growth rate for this thing. So let's go do that. Let's go back to our effects, laser. And in our beam data, I'm going to come on down to my speed. And this is going to be how fast my laser kind of fills out. So if I do 100, for example, it'll kind of do that as it fires. So let's start with that. And you can see now it doesn't kind of cut through as far. You can change the speed a little bit if you want, kind of dial that down. So it kind of looks like the laser grows out of the firing mechanism. Okay. There you go. So now it no longer spawns halfway through my ship. Pew, 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 pew. Cool. Now my laser is shooting at the bottom of my ship, which is not what I want, so I need to add a socket to my ship's mesh. So let's go to our static mesh. Open up your ship static mesh, so SM_ship. And here is my ship, right? I'm going to come over to the right, I'm going to create a socket. I'm going to call this, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it laser socket. I'm going to pull this up to the nozzle of my ship. So if you have like little cannons or whatever on your ship, you would just move this to wherever the cannons are. But my ship's going to shoot from the front. I'm going to uncheck this grid box here so I can move this quite where I want it to be. And it's important that this is rotated where the x-axis faces in the direction you want to shoot. So I'm going to go over to my rotation, grab that. I'm going to rotate it so that my x-axis is pointing up, so that's 90 degrees that way. So my x-axis is pointing up. And you do want it to be straight. If it's crooked, it's going to fire crooked. All right. Go ahead and save that. Let's go back to our blueprint, open up your player, and then over here where we're shooting, we're going to talk to the socket. So right as we shoot this thing, we're going to pass this. Let's go ahead and get a set actor relative location. Set actor relative location. There we are. And we want to get the socket, so get socket of our ship, so get socket location of ship. And then in here, we need the socket name. So I named mine laser socket, but if you're not sure, come over to your mesh here, and whatever your socket name is, so, and it is case sensitive, so you want to make sure you have the exact name in here. So laser, oops, wrong thing. So mine is laser socket. Then I'm going to plug this right into there. And then you do need to plug in your return value. So plug that in. So once we spawn this, it's going to go to our socket. Go ahead and hit compile. Save it. And now as you fire, it should be in your socket. Now mine is not firing in the correct direction, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that. Let's go back to our player. So right off of here, I'm going to do set actor relative rotation. And from there I'm going to do get socket rotation. Oof. I'll duplicate my ship value. That's Control W. Bring that over. Plug that in. I'll just copy my socket name. And I'll plug in the value. And for the target, make sure that we set the target to our return value. So we'll get that. Just double click the line here and I'll just move that around. Okay, so now we can see that it is pointing the correct direction, but it is moving the wrong direction. The reason for that actually is inside of our actor. So let's go in to our laser. Now if yours is firing in the right direction, awesome, but mine tends to fire upward, right? And you can see that this has been created so that it fires this way. Now I could fix that either in the blueprint itself or the particle effect itself, or I can fix it down here. So I'm going to select the particle movement, or the projectile movement. I'm going to come down here, and we have our velocity set as 1. Now remember that our velocity is going to act as our direction. So I'm going to change that to 0, and I'm going to have my up direction be Z. I'm going to hit compile. Pew, 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 pew. Now I fire in the right direction. Now lastly, we want to fix one other thing, and that is whenever we fire our laser, it lives for a very, very long time, like forever. So every time we fire these, and you can actually watch this little actor counter in the right-hand corner here, every time I fire one, you see that counter going up. We're at 31, 32, 33. It's all the way in the corner. And every time I fire one of these, I'm going to add to the list. Eventually, I'm going to have hundreds, maybe thousands of these things floating off into infinite space, and it's going to eat up memory, and the game's going to crash. So we don't want that to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that our laser destroys itself after a certain amount of time. So let's go back into our laser object, go to the event graph. I'm going to get rid of those. I'm going to set my begin play. Drag off, I'm going to do a delay, so delay. And however long I want this delay to run, let's say 20 seconds. And then right when it's finished, it's going to destroy the actor. So destroy actor. Alright. And we're going to test to see if this is working. I'll hit compile. And actually, let me make the timer a lot shorter so we don't have to wait 20 seconds. I'm going to have this 1 second. Alright, so here's my number. I'm going to fire. 1 second goes by. It counts down. So I have 24. And you can see the number counts down. So that we know that our actor is being destroyed after a certain amount of time, which is great because we won't run out of memory that way. And with that, I think it's going to wrap up this particular video. In our next video, we're going to look at how to make the laser hit something and blow up. So if you like this, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe. Also, if you like the content I'm creating and you want to have suggestions for future videos, head over to my Patreon page. I'll leave a link down in the description. And you are welcome to pledge some ideas to me. Every dollar that you pledge to me helps me build content, get better equipment, and overall just kind of helps me do what I do. That way I can focus on this more and other things less. Anyway, I will see you in the next video.